The Miller family's fortune wasn't just built on ambition, it was cemented with ruthlessness, a foundation of calculated moves and shattered dreams. And now, in the glittering canyons of corporate power, that fortune was destined to become the blood-soaked battleground for a meticulously planned war of revenge. Jack Miller, a relatively young 43, CEO of the once unshakable Miller Industries, stood like a ghost amidst the cardboard chaos. Moving boxes, symbols of his impending exile, were scattered like fallen dominoes across the expanse of his once pristine office. The sleek, minimalist space, a testament to his progressive leadership, or so he'd thought, now felt like a suffocating tomb. He ran a hand through his already disheveled hair, the weight of the past few months, no, years, pressing down on him with the force of a collapsing skyscraper. 10 years. 10 years he'd poured every ounce of his being into this company, striving to steer it with something resembling integrity, a quality his father, Reginald, had famously, almost proudly, lacked. Integrity, he muttered, the word tasting like ashes on his tongue. What a goddamn joke. Reginald Miller, the old man, the patriarch, the titan, he'd clawed his way to the top of the greasy corporate ladder, leaving behind a trail of broken businesses, ruined lives, and shattered reputations that stretched across continents. He was a force of nature, a titan of industry who commanded respect and fear in equal measure. But his methods were, well, let's just say they wouldn't pass muster in today's hyperethical or allegedly hyperethical business climate. Jack always carried a low hum of guilt, a deep-seated need to atone for his father's sins, to wash the Miller name clean. He tried to implement ethical practices, investing in sustainable projects that Reginald would have scoffed at, and treating his employees with respect, not as disposable cogs in the Miller Industries machine. He thought he was modernizing the company, dragging it kicking and screaming into the 21st century. He was wrong, so very wrong. He'd been playing checkers while they were playing three-dimensional chess. His biggest mistake? Underestimating his own family. He'd always seen them as, well, family. He'd failed to recognize the viper's nest he was sleeping in. Chloe Miller, his mother, a woman whose fading beauty was compensated tenfold by an iron will and a heart seemingly carved from granite, saw Jack's softness as a debilitating weakness. She constantly reminded him of Reginald's iron fist, his unwavering, almost obsessive focus on profit, his utter disdain for sentimentality. Reginald would never have let this happen, she'd sneer, her voice a venomous whisper that could curdle milk. You're ruining his legacy, Jack. You're making us all look like fools. She'd always held Reginald on a pedestal, conveniently forgetting the countless affairs and ruthless deals that had defined his life. She preferred the carefully curated image of a powerful, unyielding man. And then there was Ryan, his younger brother. Ryan, the golden boy, the perpetual party animal, the poster child for inherited privilege and irresponsible spending. He'd never worked a real day in his life, content to live off his substantial trust fund and bask in the reflected glory, and, let's be honest, the endless access to cash of the Miller name. But beneath the carefully constructed surface of carefree hedonism simmered a deep-seated resentment towards Jack, a poisonous envy that thrived in the shadows. He was jealous of Jack's position, of his responsibility, however unwanted, of the respect he commanded, or at least, used to command, within the company. He saw Jack as a stick in the mud, a killjoy, a constant reminder of his own lack of ambition and direction. Jack was always lecturing him about responsibility, fiscal prudence, and the importance of giving back to the community. Lectures that Ryan conveniently ignored while simultaneously draining his trust fund on extravagant parties and ill-advised investments. The champagne-fueled deal that nearly bankrupted Miller Industries was classic Ryan, a perfect storm of arrogance, stupidity, and reckless abandon. He'd been vacationing in Monaco, naturally, surrounded by supermodels, high rollers, and an endless supply of Dom Perignon, when he'd been approached by a shady businessman who looked and sounded suspiciously like a Bond villain, with a can't-miss investment opportunity involving a revolutionary new cryptocurrency and a promise of astronomical returns. Ryan, blinded by dollar signs, fueled by ego, and eager to finally prove himself a savvy investor and perhaps finally outshine Jack in the family's unspoken competition, had jumped in headfirst, sinking a substantial amount of company money into the venture without even bothering to perform due diligence. Of course, it turned out to be a meticulously crafted Ponzi scheme, orchestrated by a network of international con artists, and Miller Industries was left teetering on the brink of financial ruin, resembling a house of cards in a hurricane. Chloe, never one to miss an opportunity to exploit a weakness, especially Jack's, seized on the crisis with the ferocity of a lioness protecting her cubs. Except, in this case, she was protecting Ryan, the reckless cub who had almost destroyed the pride. She framed it as Jack's failure, a direct consequence of his incompetence and his naive business strategies. She conveniently overlooked Ryan's blatant role in the debacle, conveniently forgetting that he had acted entirely on his own volition, and instead focused all her anger and frustration on her eldest son. She started whispering in the ears of board members, planting seeds of doubt about Jack's leadership, painting him as a naive idealist who was clearly out of his depth and incapable of handling the complexities of the modern business world. She suggested that a more experienced and traditional leader was needed to steer the company back on course, conveniently implying that she was the only one capable of filling that role. And then there was Victoria Sterling. Victoria, Jack's ex-wife, the embodiment of icy elegance, razor-sharp intellect, and ruthless ambition, all wrapped in a designer dress and perfectly coiffed hair. Their marriage had lasted 10 years, a decade of passionate love, intellectual sparring, and mutual admiration, followed by a swift and devastating betrayal that had left Jack reeling. He discovered she was having an affair with a ruthless business rival, a man who had been trying to acquire Miller Industries for years, a man who saw Victoria as his inside weapon. The divorce was messy, public, and incredibly painful, dragging Jack's personal life through the mud and fueling endless tabloid fodder. Victoria walked away with a hefty settlement, a significant chunk of the Miller fortune. But it wasn't enough. Money, for Victoria, was merely a tool, a means to an end. She wanted more. She wanted power. She wanted to see Jack suffer, to witness the dismantling of everything he held dear. The scene played out in Jack's mind like a recurring nightmare, a vivid and haunting reminder of the betrayal that had shattered his world. Victoria, draped in a crimson designer gown that screamed wealth and power, her emerald eyes sparkling with barely concealed malice, meeting with Chloe in a dimly lit, ultra-exclusive restaurant known for its discretion and its exorbitant prices. He'd seen them from across the room, their heads bent together in conspiratorial whispers, their body language radiating an undeniable sense of plotting and intrigue. He knew, instinctively, that they were conspiring against him, weaving a web of deceit that would inevitably ensnare him. He remembered the way Victoria had looked at him as he walked past their table, a smug, knowing smile playing on her perfectly sculpted lips. It wasn't just a smile, it was a declaration of war, a signal that the game had begun. It was the smile of a predator who had just cornered its prey, the chillingly confident expression of someone who knew they held all the cards. He should have known then what was coming, should have recognized the danger signs, but he was too trusting, too naive, too blinded by his own grief and disbelief. He had underestimated the depth of their animosity, the lengths to which they were willing to go to achieve their goals. The plan was simple, elegant in its cruelty, and utterly devastating in its execution. Chloe, the strategist, and Victoria, the manipulator, convinced Ryan, the pawn, to publicly denounce Jack, accusing him of gross mismanagement, financial impropriety, and, ultimately, corruption. They leaked damaging information to the press, carefully curated snippets of financial data that painted Jack as a villain, a greedy CEO who was lining his own pockets while the company crumbled around him. They manipulated the board members, playing on their fears and insecurities, swaying them with false promises of stability, increased profits, and a return to the good old days of Reginald Miller's iron-fisted rule. They presented Jack as a threat to the company's future, a liability who needed to be removed for the good of everyone involved. The vote was swift, brutal, and utterly humiliating. Jack was ousted as CEO, stripped of his power and authority after a lifetime of loyalty. He watched, numb with shock and disbelief, as his empire, the company he had dedicated his life to rebuilding and modernizing, crumbled before his eyes. Chloe, naturally, took over as interim CEO, with Ryan as her eager, and utterly unqualified, lieutenant, basking in the undeserved glow of his newfound power. Victoria, of course, was pulling the strings from behind the scenes, whispering in Chloe's ear, advising her on every move, ensuring that the company was steered in the direction that best served her own agenda. He lost his company, his reputation, and very nearly his house, teetering on the edge of financial ruin himself. He was publicly humiliated, vilified in the press, portrayed as a villain who deserved everything that was happening to him. Chloe, Ryan, and Victoria thought they'd won. They raised their glasses of expensive champagne, toasting their victory over Jack Miller, confident that they had finally crushed him. But they underestimated him. They mistook his kindness for weakness, his integrity for gullibility, his desire for fairness as a sign of vulnerability. They forgot that Jack Miller, beneath his gentle demeanor and his genuine desire to do good, possessed a core of steel, a fierce determination that had been forged in the fires of adversity, hardened by the relentless pressure of his family's expectations. They had poked the sleeping bear, and now that bear was awake and hungry for revenge. In the months that followed, while they were basking in their ill-gotten gains, celebrating their triumph with lavish parties and extravagant expenditures, Jack was quietly, meticulously planning his revenge. He disappeared from the public eye, severing ties with his former colleagues, friends, and even acquaintances. He sold his luxurious penthouse apartment, a symbol of his former success, and moved into a small, unassuming apartment in a less fashionable part of town, far from the opulence and extravagance of his former life. He needed to become invisible, a ghost in the machine, in order to execute his plan. He spent his days poring over financial documents, meticulously analyzing every transaction, every investment, every hidden detail. He uncovered hidden transactions, untangling a complex web of deceit, painstakingly tracing the flow of money to offshore accounts and shell corporations that implicated Chloe, Ryan, and Victoria in a series of illegal activities, ranging from tax evasion to money laundering to outright fraud. He was building a case, brick by slow brick, that would expose their corruption and bring their empire crashing down around them. He reached out to old contacts, former employees who had been wronged by his family, people who had been dismissed, overlooked, or betrayed. He gathered information, piecing together the puzzle of their corruption like a master detective assembling a complex crime scene. He discovered that Ryan had been gambling away company money on high-stakes poker games and reckless investments, that Chloe had been using company funds to finance her lavish lifestyle, purchasing expensive jewelry, artwork, and real estate under the guise of company expenses, and that Victoria had been secretly working with their business rivals, feeding them inside information and sabotaging Miller Industries from within. He started meeting with a mysterious woman in a dimly lit cafe, a rendezvous point chosen for its anonymity and its excellent coffee. Her name was Isabella Rossi, and she was a forensic accountant with a legendary reputation for uncovering hidden assets, exposing financial fraud, and bringing down corrupt corporations. She was a master of her craft, a relentless investigator with an uncanny ability to follow the money trail, a woman who wouldn't stop until she uncovered the truth, no matter how deeply buried it was. Isabella became Jack's confidant, his partner in crime, the one person he could truly trust. She helped him analyze the complex financial data, identify the weaknesses in their elaborate scheme, and develop a foolproof plan to expose their corruption and bring them to justice. She was his weapon, his shield, and his guiding star in the darkness. He learned how to use social media to his advantage, creating anonymous accounts and posting carefully selected snippets of incriminating information online, fueling rumors and sowing distrust among their allies. He leaked documents to investigative journalists, exposing their lies and their greed to the world, turning public opinion against them. He was waging a war on multiple fronts, using every weapon at his disposal. He knew he was playing a dangerous game, that he was risking everything, including his own freedom, but he didn't care. He was consumed by a burning desire for justice, a desperate need to make them pay for what they had done to him, for the years of pain and humiliation they had inflicted. He wanted to expose their greed, their lies, their complete lack of moral compass, to show the world the true faces of Chloe, Ryan, and Victoria Miller. The game had begun. Jack wasn't just trying to get his company back. He wanted to destroy them, to tear down their empire brick by brick, to dismantle the legacy of ruthlessness and corruption that had defined the Miller family for generations. He was going to make them regret ever crossing him, to make them understand the true meaning of pain and betrayal. He knew it wouldn't be easy. Chloe was a formidable opponent, a cunning strategist who had been playing the corporate game for decades, a master manipulator who knew all the tricks of the trade. Ryan was unpredictable, impulsive, and capable of anything, a loose cannon who could easily derail his carefully laid plans. And Victoria was a master manipulator, a woman who could charm the birds out of the trees, a skilled deceiver who could twist reality to suit her own needs. But Jack was ready. He had spent months preparing for this moment, gathering his resources, building his alliances, and honing his strategies. He was no longer the naive, idealistic CEO they had underestimated. He was a warrior, a survivor, a man with nothing to lose and everything to gain. He stood in his small apartment, staring out at the twinkling city lights, a vast ocean of anonymity that concealed both opportunity and danger. He felt a surge of adrenaline, a potent mix of fear and excitement coursing through his veins. He knew that the next few weeks, the next few months, would be the most dangerous and challenging of his life. But he was ready for the challenge. He had nothing left to lose but his honor. He turned away from the window, a glint of steely resolve in his eye, a hint of a dangerous smile playing on his lips. He picked up his phone and dialed a number that would set in motion the final stage of his plan. "It's time," he said, his voice low and determined, barely a whisper. "Let's show them what we're made of. They think they've won. They have no idea what's coming. They are about to learn what happens when you mess with the wrong Miller."